The Second Crusade was the second major crusade launched from Europe as Catholic holy war against Islam. The Second Crusade was started in response to the fall of the county of Edessa the previous year to the forces of Zengi. The county had been founded during the First Crusade by King Baldwin of Boulogne in 1098. While it was the first Crusader state to be founded, it was also the first to fall. The Second Crusade was announced by Pope Eugene III, and was the first of the Crusades to be led by European kings, namely Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany, with help from a number of other European nobles. The armies of the two kings marched separately across Europe. After crossing Byzantine territory into Anatolia, both armies were separately defeated by the Seljuk Turks. The main Western Christian source, Odo of Doi, and Syriac Christian sources claim that the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I Komnenos secretly hindered the Crusaders' progress, particularly in Anatolia, where he is alleged to have deliberately ordered Turks to attack them. Louis and Conrad and the remnants of their armies reached Jerusalem and participated in 1148 in an ill-advised attack on Damascus. The crusade in the east was a failure for the Crusaders and a great victory for the Muslims. It would ultimately have a key influence on the fall of Jerusalem and give rise to the Third Crusade at the end of the 12th century. The only Christian success of the Second Crusade came to a combined force of 13,000 Flemish, Frisian, Norman, English, Scottish, and German Crusaders in 1147. Traveling from England, by ship, to the Holy Land, the army stopped and helped the smaller Portuguese army in the capture of Lisbon, expelling its Moorish occupants. Background: the fall of Edessa. After the First Crusade and the Minor Crusade of 1101, there were three Crusader states established in the east: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch and the County of Edessa. A fourth, the County of Tripoli, was established in 1109. Edessa was the most northerly of these, and also the weakest and least populated. As such, it was subject to frequent attacks from the surrounding Muslim states ruled by the Ottomads, Danishmends and Seljuk Turks. Count Baldwin II and future Count Jocelyn of Courtenay were taken captive after their defeat of the Battle of Harran in 1104. Baldwin and Jocelyn were both captured a second time in 1122, and although Edessa recovered somewhat after the Battle of Azaz in 1125, Jocelyn was killed in battle in 1131. His successor Jocelyn II was forced into an alliance with the Byzantine Empire. But in 1143 both the Byzantine Emperor John II Komnenos and the King of Jerusalem Fulk of Anjou died. Jocelyn had also quarrelled with the Count of Tripoli and the Prince of Antioch, leaving Edessa with no powerful allies. Meanwhile, the Seljuk Zengi, Artabig of Mosul, had added to his rule in 1128 Aleppo, the key to power in Syria, contested between the rulers of Mosul and Damascus. Both Zengi and King Baldwin II turned their attention towards Damascus. Baldwin was defeated outside the great city in 1129. Damascus, ruled by the Burid dynasty, later allied with King Fulk when Zengi besieged the city in 1139 and 1140. The alliance was negotiated by the chronicler Osama ibn Munki. In late 1144, Jocelyn II allied with the Ottomads and marched out of Edessa with almost his entire army to support the Ottokid army against Aleppo. Zengi, already seeking to take advantage of Fulk's death in 1143, hurried north to besiege Edessa, which fell to him after a month on the 24th of December 1144. Manasses of Hierges, Philip of Milly and others were sent from Jerusalem to assist, but arrived too late. Jocelyn II continued to rule the remnants of the county from Tebessel, but little by little the rest of the territory was captured by Muslims or sold to the Byzantines. Zengi himself was praised throughout Islam as defender of the faith, and al-Malik al-Mansur, the victorious king. He did not pursue an attack on the remaining territory of Edessa, or the Principality of Antioch, as was feared. Events in Mosul compelled him to return home, and he once again set his sights on Damascus. However, he was assassinated by a slave in 1146 and was succeeded in Aleppo by his son Nur ad-Din. Quantum predecessors. The news of the fall of Edessa was brought back to Europe first by pilgrims early in 1145, and then by embassies from Antioch, Jerusalem and Armenia. Bishop Hugh of Jabala reported the news to Pope Eugene III, who issued the bull Quantum predecessors on 1 December of that year, calling for a second crusade. Hugh also told the Pope of an Eastern Christian king, who, it was hoped, would bring relief to the Crusader states. This is the first documented mention of Prester John. Eugene did not control Rome and lived instead at Viterbo. But nevertheless the Second Crusade was meant to be more organized and centrally controlled than the first. The armies would be led by the strongest kings of Europe and a route would be planned beforehand. The initial response to the new Crusade bull was poor, and it in fact had to be reissued when it was clear that Louis VII of France would be taking part in the expedition. Louis VII had also been considering a new expedition independently of the Pope, which he announced to his Christmas court at Bourges in 1145. It is debatable whether Louis was planning a crusade of his own or in fact a pilgrimage, as he wanted to fulfill a vow made by his dead brother Philip to go to the Holy Land. It is probable that Louis had made this decision independently of hearing about Quantum predecessors. In any case, Abbot Suger and other nobles were not in favor of Louis's plans, as he would be gone from the kingdom for several years. Louis consulted Bernard of Clairvaux, who referred him back to Eugene. By now Louis would have definitely heard about the papal bull, and Eugene enthusiastically supported Louis's crusade. The bull was reissued on 1 March 1146, and Eugene authorized Bernard to preach the news throughout France. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. The Pope commissioned Bernard to preach the Second Crusade, and granted the same indulgences for it which Pope Urban II had accorded to the First Crusade. A parliament was convoked at Vézelay in Burgundy in 1146, and Bernard preached before the assembly on March 31. Louis VII of France, his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and the princes and lords present prostrated themselves at the feet of Bernard to receive the Pilgrim's Cross. Bernard then passed into Germany, and the reported miracles which multiplied almost at his every step undoubtedly contributed to the success of his mission. At Speyer, Conrad III of Germany and his nephew, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, received the cross from the hand of Bernard. Pope Eugene came in person to France to encourage the enterprise. For all his overmastering zeal, Bernard was by nature neither a bigot nor a persecutor. As in the First Crusade, the preaching inadvertently led to attacks on Jews. A fanatical French monk named Rudolph was apparently inspiring massacres of Jews in the Rhineland, Cologne, Mainz, Worms and Speyer, with Rudolph claiming Jews were not contributing financially to the rescue of the Holy Land. Bernard, the Archbishop of Cologne and the Archbishop of Mainz were vehemently opposed to these attacks, and so Bernard travelled from Flanders to Germany to deal with the problem and quiet the mobs. Bernard then found Rudolph in Mainz and was able to silence him, returning him to his monastery. Wendish Crusade. When the Second Crusade was called, many South Germans volunteered to crusade in the Holy Land. The North German Saxons were reluctant. They told Saint Bernard of their desire to campaign against the Slavs at an imperial diet meeting in Frankfurt on 13 March 1147. Approving of the Saxons' plan, Eugenius issued a papal bull known as the Divina Dispensationem on 13 April. This bull stated that there was to be no difference between the spiritual rewards of the different crusaders. Those who volunteered to crusade against the Slavs were primarily Danes, Saxons and Poles, although there were also some Bohemians. The papal legate, Anselm of Havelberg, was placed in overall command. The campaign itself was led by Saxon families such as the Ascanians, Wettin and Schauenbergers. Upset by German participation in the Crusade, the Obotrites preemptively invaded Wagria in Holstein in June 1147, leading to the march of the Crusaders in late summer 1147. After expelling the Obotrites from Christian territory, the Crusaders targeted the Obotrite fort at Dobben and the Lutetian fort at Demmin. The forces attacking Dobben included those of the Danes Canute V and Sweyn III, Adalbert II, Archbishop of Bremen and Duke Henry the Lion of Saxony. When some crusaders advocated ravaging the countryside, others objected by asking, "Is not the land we are devastating our land, and the people we are fighting our people?" The Saxon army under Henry the Lion withdrew after the pagan chief, Niclot, agreed to have Dobben's garrison undergo baptism. After an unsuccessful siege of Demmin, a contingent of crusaders was diverted by the Margraves to attack Pomerania instead. They reached the already Christian city Stettin, whereupon the Crusaders dispersed after meeting with Bishop Adalbert of Pomerania and Prince Ratibor I of Pomerania. According to Bernard of Clairvaux, the goal of the crusade was to battle the pagan Slavs, until such a time as, by God's help, they shall either be converted or deleted. However, the crusade failed to achieve the conversion of most of the Wends. The Saxons achieved largely token conversions at Dobben, as the Slavs resorted to their pagan beliefs once the Christian armies dispersed. Albert of Pomerania explained, if they had come to strengthen the Christian faith, they should do so by preaching, not by arms. By the end of the Crusade, the countryside of Mecklenburg and Pomerania was plundered and depopulated with much bloodshed, especially by the troops of Henry the Lion. This was to help bring about more Christian victories in the future decades. The Slavic inhabitants also lost much of their methods of production, limiting their resistance in the future. Reconquista and the fall of Lisbon. In the spring of 1147, the Pope authorized the expansion of the Crusade into the Iberian Peninsula, in the context of the Reconquista. He also authorized Alfonso VII of Leon and Castile to equate his campaigns against the Moors with the rest of the Second Crusade. In May 1147, the first contingents of Crusaders left from Dartmouth in England for the Holy Land. Bad weather forced the ships to stop on the Portuguese coast, at the northern city of Porto on 16 June 1147. There they were convinced to meet with King Afonso I of Portugal. The Crusaders agreed to help the king attack Lisbon, with a solemn agreement that offered to them the pillage of the city's goods and the ransom money for expected prisoners. The siege of Lisbon lasted from the 1st of July to the 25th of October 1147 when, after 4 months, the Moorish rulers agreed to surrender, primarily due to hunger within the city. Most of the Crusaders settled in the newly captured city, but some of them set sail and continued to the Holy Land. Some of them, who had departed earlier, helped capture Santarém earlier in the same year. Later they also helped to conquer Sintra, Almada, Palma and Setúbal, and they were allowed to stay in the conquered lands, where they settled down and had offspring. Elsewhere on the Iberian Peninsula, almost at the same time, Alfonso VII of Leon, Ramon Berenguer V, Count of Barcelona, and others led a mixed army of Catalan and French crusaders against the rich port city of Almeria. With support from Agino's Apisan Navy, the city was occupied in October 1147. Ramon Berenguer then invaded the lands of the Almoravid Taifa Kingdom of Valencia and Murcia. In December 1148, he captured Tortosa after a 5-month siege again with the help of French, Anglo-Normans and Genoese crusaders. The next year, Fraga, Lleida and Mequinenza in the confluence of the Segre and Ebro rivers fell to his army forces. Islamic Muslim forces in this period comprised small bodies of professional troops, which were augmented by volunteers and conscripts in times of war. The largest of the Muslim states at the time, the Turkish Great Seljuk Sultanate, which ruled most of what is modern Iran and Iraq, had about 10,000 full-term soldiers. The number of troops available to the Syrian states was much smaller. The core of the professional troops were the Ghulam or Mamluk, who were trained for war since childhood. The cost of raising and training a Mamluk was about 30 dinars. To compensate for their quantitative weaknesses, the Muslim states sought qualitative superiority. The professional soldiers of the Muslim states, who were usually ethnic Turks, tended to be very well trained and equipped. The basis of the military system in the Islamic Middle East was the Iqta system of fiefs, which supported a certain number of troops in every district. In the event of war, the Ardaith militias, based in the cities under the command of the Rais, and who were usually ethnic Arabs, were called upon to increase the number of troops. The Ardaith militia, though less well trained than the Turkish professional troops, were often very strongly motivated by religion, especially the concept of jihad. The principal Islamic commander was Mu'in al-Din an-Nur, the Artabeg of Damascus from 1138 to 1149. Damascus was supposedly ruled by the Burid emirs of Damascus, but an-Nur, who commanded the military, was the real ruler of the city. The historian David Nicole described an-Nur as an able general and diplomat, also well known as a patron of the arts. Because the Burid dynasty was displaced in 1154 by the Zangid dynasty, an-Nur's role in repulsing the Second Crusade has been largely erased, with historians and chroniclers loyal to the Zangids giving the credit to an-Nur's rival, Nur ad-Din Zangi, the emir of Aleppo. Christian Crusaders. The German contingent comprised about 2,000 knights, the French contingent had about 700 knights from the king's lands, while the nobility raised smaller numbers of knights, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem had about 550 knights and 6,000 infantrymen. Both the French and German contingents had huge numbers of camp followers, most of whom did not survive the crusade. As the monk, Odo of Douai, noted, the weak and helpless are always a burden to their commanders and a source of prey to their enemies. The French knights preferred to fight on horseback, while the German knights liked to fight on foot. The Roman chronicler John Kinemos wrote, "The French are particularly capable of riding horseback in good order and attacking with the spear, and their cavalry surpasses that of the Germans in speed. The Germans, however, are able to fight on foot better than the French and excel in using the great sword." Conrad III was considered to be a brave knight, though often described as indecisive in moments of crisis. Louis VII was a devout Christian with a sensitive side who was often attacked by contemporaries like Bernard of Clairvaux for being more in love with his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, than being interested in war or politics.